Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. And today I'm delighted to welcome special guest, Sara Byers. Now, Sara is a CEO, a speaker, a thought leader, and a channeled poet, which sounds fascinating, whose work bridges business, service, and spirit. She leads Leonardo's Pizza, has chaired multiple corporate and non-profit boards, and received an honorary doctorate from Champlain College. Sara is the author of Heart and Moon and Wise Stars, and she's also the former co-host of the Collecting Insight podcast. Her work blends intuition with clarity, which you can see more about on her website, actually. Her mission is to ease the weight we carry and awaken the joy, connection, and inner power that already lives within us. So you can see why I immediately resonate with Sara, because that aligns so beautifully with where I'm coming from. Sara's website is sarasbyers.com, which is SARASBYERS.com. Don't know why I'm partly lisping today. Those are S's, not F's.
Wait, they're tough.
So, Sara, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Catherine, thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to talking with you.
Fantastic. Well, you are very present, online with all these beautiful video clips that you do, many of which are just really off the cuff in the moment, aren't they? I
Yes.
just felt inspired to say this. You're obviously straight out of the workout or out of the shower or wherever you are.
Totally.
And it's just so natural and so accessible. I just love the way that you do that. So I immediately thought you'd be a fantastic guest.
Oh, that means so much to me. Thank you, because they're not always the most attractive. If I was going to sort of quaff myself, I wouldn't be post-workout. But I sort of, in those moments, it's not only the words and the thought for me, it's the energy that sort of surrounds all of it. And I want to harness it all in that moment. So thank you for appreciating it. Thank you. That means a lot.
Oh, my pleasure. I think we're so lookist, aren't we? We're so into, is this a good presentation? Is my hair right? And I think I realized a long time ago, if I'm going to wait till my hair's perfect, I'm never going to do anything.
So true. Well, you can see my hair. That is absolutely the case. I finally was like, it's going to do what it wants. And so therefore, I'm just going to go with the flow of all of it. I know. But that takes, for me, it took quite a bit of time to sort of get to that place where the outer reflected the inner, which was unrefined.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's a journey, isn't it? But it's a relief in a way, because then we can go, okay, well, actually what I want people to tune into the energy.
Yeah.
Not,
Yes.
the presentation.
No. Yes. And let's be, for me, the more real and authentic we can all be, and we all have those moments. I mean, our hair is not always perfect. I mean, I have yet, I don't, I mean, maybe there's someone out there, but I don't know that I've met someone who doesn't wake up in the morning and feel the need to do something. So it's sort of, our true, real, and raw authenticity, I think, is where the heart of each of us really lies. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Well, this is now obviously the hair episode. Everyone's going to remember it's the hair episode. So moving on.
I love it.
Something that we were talking about in the pre-call that I really loved was this whole notion of remembering. And you were talking to me about your connection with this notion of remembering. So let's start from there. You've got this kind of particular relationship with the notion of remembering. Would you like to kick off by letting us know what that means to you and why it's important?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that what I didn't realize for much of my life was I was sort of layering things on. So layering achievement, layering who I wanted to become, who I didn't think I was, who I wanted to be a good person, and I wanted to be successful, and I probably wanted to be coiffed in some way. What I found over the last few years is that my journey, and I believe all of our journey, is actually a journey towards remembering. Um, because what's deep inside us is the core of who we are. It is our commonality, it's our divinity, it's our brilliance and radiance and beauty. And the more that we can remember that space and that person and that truth, I think the more we not necessarily become, but the more that we are in the world. And I really think that the human journey is one of remembering. I talk about the way that I sort of see it is, we're all born this, I don't necessarily like the word pure, but sort of unadulterated soul. And then we sort of move through the first half or so of our lives, layering on experience and things, material things, and challenging times and celebratory times. And then we get to this place where we realize we are so weighted by all of the things that we've layered that then we end up delayering, throwing away the material, sort of pushing away the narratives and stories we've told ourselves. And we end up at the same place that we started, which is that core self. So that's where I find that we're in a journey of remembrance, each one of us, and also remembering the connection we have to every single, to me, not only living, but every single thing on this planet and on this earth.
Beautiful.
Mm.
And so can you remember when you first started getting really clear about that? Because as you're talking about coming in a certain way and then layering things, and then we start delayering things. And perhaps within that model, we're all somewhere in the layering or delayering or both at once, maybe sometimes.
Yes.
If you kind of cast your mind back, can you remember when you first started to sort of feel like this is a process of remembering, actually?
Yeah. I think that for me, as I think about myself, which encompasses to me body, soul, spirit, I was hardened somewhat within that layer. People who met me would not consider me hardened, but I think I was somewhat impermeable in terms of what I believed that life was about. And my journey was through grief, in essence, and the passing of my stepfather, which sort of opened up a crack, um, and showed me that life may not be exactly what I thought that it was. And that crack, for a person who has the curiosity that I have, I needed to explore that opening. And so once I began to explore that opening, and that opening for me was, it is possible that there is more than just what I see. There is more than just the materialism, sort of the physicality of what I see in this world. There may be what I've always kind of held in my heart, but never could articulate, a spirit and a connection beyond. And so once I felt that crack, I just dove into sort of studying different modalities within spirituality, energy work, and then started that opened me, and I started receiving words in the middle of the night. And that just, it was like a rocket ship somewhere. That just catapulted me. But I think we all have these moments and opportunities where we can choose to sort of look at it with curiosity and with openness, or we can sort of continue down the road. And I think we have many of these. It's not like we have one and then we don't get to see it again. But I think we do have multiple opportunities for remembrance within our lives.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So that when you say the crack, and you mentioned the word grief,
Mm.
what was it? The grief of the loss that caused the crack?
Mm. I think the grief allowed me, because I was raw, to not discard what was happening. So
That made it very immediate for you.
it did, because essentially my stepfather had passed, and I had been driving back and forth to hospice about 20 minutes to and fro every day for 12 days, listening to the instrumental from the Titanic because I wanted to feel everything. And he passed away, and I drove home and got to my road and decided I needed to change the music. And I pulled up a song by the Lumineers, but a different song started playing. My radio screen said it was the Lumineers, but Frank Sinatra's My Way came out of the speakers. And it said, "And now the end is near, so I face the final curtain." And I knew with every fiber, I can feel it right now, of my being, that that was my stepfather communicating. And I could have, in that moment, been like, oh my gosh, like it almost pushed it away. Like I can do that. I think we all can, that's, oh wow, that's weird. That's weird. And could have moved on with my day. Instead, I'm like, oh my goodness, is that possible? And in grief, because of where you are, you want to seek and you want to learn and you want to chase even that possibility.
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, honestly, I was tearing up when you were telling that. That's such a sweet story as well, isn't it? And how beautiful. And what a lovely message to send, actually.
Oh, it's amazing. And for the next 2 weeks, he would come to me in my dreams, and he, would come to me and tell me he was with my mother in the kitchen. And I would tell my mom the next day, and she said, "That's the first night that I made dinner for myself." And so it just kept sort of adding on top of itself, and kind of little breadcrumbs for me to continue to follow, which I think we all get in this life. And I'm enormously grateful to him for offering me this space, because it is giving me a sense of peace and a sense of what could be unlike anything I had ever held before.
No. Beautiful. Well, there is. It's interesting you mentioned about that power of grief to open us. That's something I've been thinking about lately as well. And there are certain, in some of the traditions and modalities, grief is very much connected with surrender and opening and chaos and allowing things through that we're not controlling. So I think that's a very powerful and beautiful message. I just wanted to emphasize there for the listeners, because we often think, that's, damage, pain, wrong, move on.
Yes.
But it is so opening.
Oh, so beautifully said. And, you know, interesting that you should focus there. A very close friend's husband passed away in the last 2 weeks, who I had a very strong spiritual connection with. And what I've learned in this space is there's a holding that can happen in that space. And it's the only word that I have, but it's a holding of oneself, because it's almost inescapable. You can't escape grief. I mean, you can try, but you can't. You have to move through it. And so in that space of holding, I really do think we almost hear ourselves, because it's such a deep and powerful space. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for you, this then connected through into this recognition of remembering. Would you like to say a bit more about that connection between that opening and the recognition of the fact that it's a process of remembering?
Yeah. I had always gone through my life, I would make these big leaps. They didn't make any intellectual sense. I would, leave a position that was incredible, and I was super successful in sort of moving up this massive corporate ladder, and decided all of a sudden that I felt like I needed to move back to where I grew up and join my family's business. Like, it made no sense. I took a 70% pay cut to do so. But I knew that I knew that I needed to do that. There have been multiple moments in my life standing up and giving a speech at a 800-person business event, talking about sort of the emotional aspects of myself and saying that I'm not just business. There were certain things I would do, things that did not make sense, but that I felt, and I never articulated that feeling or that knowing. For me, the remembrance post grief and post the opening was a remembrance of what that is, that we all carry. A certain knowing, a certain feeling, a certain spirit, our soul. It can get so laden by all of the other parts of the world and the busy, and that this is my job and these are my, my child, and I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to look like this, I need to be that. But under it all, it was always this really subtle voice. And so that remembering for me allowed that subtle voice to become the dominant voice. And so that remembering of that voice allowed it to be the dominant part of my life. And what was scary at first was, how does this correlate? Because, I'm still, like, right now, I chair the board of a college. Like, how do I integrate, these pieces? Until last year was the chair of the Vermont Business Roundtable of 125 CEOs. This doesn't fit. This remembrance doesn't fit. And yet it was so loud, it had become so big that there was no choice for me but to figure out how to either discard the rest of my life or figure out a way to integrate it. But that opening it just allows it to get bigger. And like I said, it made I grew up, I had tremendous anxiety for most of my life. At points, such severe social anxiety, which is very odd for people now to hear, but it was hard for me to leave the house except for work. And so to look at that person and to use sort of this remembering to see who I actually am has been one of the most powerful things. It's eliminated all of that stuff that I carried.
Good.
Yeah. Yes. I know.
Beautiful. Well, one thing I just want to pick up on from what you said is that you found that remembrance and then finding out who you really are as a result of opening to something, to this possibility about your stepfather actually communicating with you. And I think that's a connection that we often don't realize, that the way to find ourselves is to open to something that we don't understand outside us. So that gives us a way to finding ourselves, which can be very powerful. So that's a beautiful connection. And you said about the anxiety and that has now gone. Do you now have a different perspective on what that anxiety was about?
I certainly do. Yeah. Ooh, that's going to bring tears. Now when I look back, and this is not, I have no idea, if this is common or not, or if this is everyone's reason. Mine was that I felt that I had to be in the world different than who I actually was. And I didn't know that at the time. I was so scared that people would see me. And that was, in university, like I dropped out of college because I couldn't get myself to go to class. It was too scary. I would, I couldn't, to talk to someone I didn't know was incredibly scary because I had this persona that I was trying to be because I didn't think that I was enough because I wasn't letting that actual person out. I wasn't letting that true person flourish. And so because she was bound. It was uncomfortable all the time. And until I, was like, this is who I am, and it's so strong in and of itself that nothing that anyone thinks matters almost because it's connected to something greater. Until I got there, it was really hard. I had someone once tell me, you were a unicorn wearing a bear suit. And that is how I would describe the anxiety. Because inside I was a unicorn.
Amazing way to describe
Yes.
it. Fantastic. Well, you know what? I think probably a lot of people have their own versions of that experience. Anxiety as a result of believing that we can't just be who we really are.
Yeah. And there's incongruence there.
Yeah.
Like you're just constantly in a state of incongruence. And I can say that I have another person who's close in my life who has a certain level of anxiety. And what's interesting is I think she is super capable of seeing the incongruence around her. And that makes her uncomfortable because she doesn't carry that. Like, so I think it can kind of go both ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you'd had this incredible transformation, really. So what happened then, and how did that kind of lead into you doing what you're doing now?
Mm. So as I mentioned, I began writing words in the middle of the night, and I have written over 3,500 poems that didn't always feel like mine or me, and that's hard to explain, but they would use words like hearken, and I don't use that in my everyday language initially. So, but they were guiding. So whether they were my deepest self or connection to something divine, I still don't know the answer. But they really helped guide me through some of those more difficult years where I was really trying to understand all of this. And then, as I mentioned, I really came to a point because I had a certain reputation. I was a business leader and a community leader, and I was known. I had a fairly public face in our state. And I at first was like in hiding. I started an Instagram page where I would put this poetry because I'm like, what am I supposed to do with it? It's not just for me. I know that. So I sort of, I created the Instagram handle Dear Joy Love and just started posting a poem a day. No one here knew. And then what surprised me is I would start talking because I connected with many leaders in the community over lunch or coffee. And I would start just throwing it out here and there. And what shocked me was the number of people with whom this resonated. I would say 95%. I thought that, we're all walking around with this certain sort of performance face, but I was shocked by the fact that other people had their own spiritual experiences, or it like resonated and reflected in them something within themselves that they could feel. And it gave me not only the license, but the push to sort of start to integrate this into aspects of my life. So for me, it was, starting when I was chairing the business roundtable, starting our business meetings with a poem, and as the third female chair in its history, that was a bit of a risk. But I'm like, I need to start pushing these things. And the response to all of it was always so incredible. And it's led to me now holding that space. I now call it's sort of the name of it came to me, which is PSI, presence, strategy, and intuition, and a way to embody presence within any part of our lives that then informs both, which allows intuition and informs strategy. Because when I look back, that's always what I was doing. So now it's how can I help other people both articulate and allow all of those measures? Because to me, it's the heart, the mind, and the gut. It's the variety of intelligence centers that we have within our bodies. And the more that we can, I'm not going to say balance, but sort of leverage all of them, I think the stronger we're going to be in society and as we face a future with artificial intelligence and questioning the human value proposition, et cetera. So that's sort of where it's led me is now this integration of what it means to be intuitive and a business person and to share that with other people.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So,
It's fun.
I mean, what's great as well is it's when you speak of it, I think, oh, that makes perfect sense. But I would never have called it presence, strategy, intuition. I would have called it something completely else.
Right.
But that's obviously aligns perfectly with your particular
Yes.
way of embodying sharing it with people.
Yes.
So how are you now working with people and helping people?
So I offer sessions. So I offer one-on-one sessions with people, either sort of a one-off when they're in a space where just something's murky and they're having a tough time working through it. And I also offer sort of longer term engagements, a 3-session and a 6-session opportunity. And that is a space, as I mentioned, where it's sort of like I'm holding the container. And in that container, we are both reflecting each other. So I'm hearing things, they're hearing things, like it's just moving, and then we get to sort of look at what the strategy could be around what we're hearing. But I also recently began to train in this. I call it almost, it's a field state of being, but to train other people in it, because it's great that, I'm holding this and can offer this to people in sessions. But for me, as I mentioned, it is where the strength of being human lies. And the more that we can harness that, each of us, the better off we're going to be in our businesses, in our families, in society as we face some of the changes that we face. So now I've begun doing workshops and talking with CEO groups and just really helping people both feel and then understand how this can be useful in their lives.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So are you saying that you're working with groups using this information? Are you also teaching other people to work with other people using this information?
I haven't gotten there yet, as this is fairly new, but I do see that because I see it to a certain degree as a modality. Because I used to have so much trouble figuring out the language around what I was doing. And that's where present strategy intuition came, because oftentimes we bifurcate those things. We're like, okay, in the morning, I'm going to meditate. So that's when I'm going to be present. And then at work, I'm going to be strategic. And then when I get home and right before I go to bed or I'm in dreamland or that liminal space, I'm going to feel sort of intuitive hits. Like we would bifurcate all these pieces. But for me, the strength of them and the power of this is in the unification of all of that. It's in this moment that I'm sitting with you. I am allowing the grounding of presence. I'm allowing intuition to come through, and I'm letting my mind sort of interpret that through strategy. And I think that's if that holding of that field is incredibly powerful. So I do think that at some point it could be something that sort of becomes something that practitioners can use within their own practices.
Yeah, I could completely see you doing that because that was
Yeah.
coming up in my mind. I hope she's training people to do this because no. And I think my other question is, you're obviously very familiar with that way of framing what you're doing now.
Mhm.
Do you feel that process, strategy, intuition model was actually at play in you prior to you having your amazing transformation?
Absolutely. Um, as I look back, I mean, I used to give a lot of speeches, and I said one of the college commencement speeches I gave, it was 16 minutes long. I wrote it in 10 minutes and didn't look at it. I mean, because because it was in that space of presence and flow. And that's so I would always integrate that. The leaps that I talked about, those were from that space. I knew them. And actually this articulation, because of how I receive, the articulation of those three words came to me like that. It's not, it's, I get business ideas. I mean, I have things pop into my head when I'm in that space. So, that's why I always, I talk about things not being mine. So even this, in some ways, like I didn't sort of sit there with a pen trying to create it. It just popped in and gave me the name of it, which was helpful. But yes, I do believe I have always sort of, in my most successful and most resonant moments, held that space.
Yeah. I think that's
Um,
an amazing thing for us to remember, like that often when we have a breakthrough or a transformation, it gives us a new access to things that we already had and have
oh,
already been using and grounding.
yes, it's so true.
Yeah. Fantastic. So
Yes,
what?
and it's interesting as you say that, it brings me back to remembering, because there's remembering and uncovering, you know what I mean? Because I wouldn't have been able to articulate it. I actually couldn't. I literally could not. People would say things to me about myself, and that's probably true of all of us. We have people telling us what they feel from us and what resonates, and it's hard for us to find. It's hard for us to find that resonance within ourselves. So I think that comes back to sort of the remembering and uncovering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So there are obviously a lot of people in the world at the moment who are trying to be helpful, and some of them are in leadership positions, some of them are parents, some of them are spiritual leaders, and some of those people are listening to this right now as this broadcasts.
Mm.
Um, is there something you'd like to say to those people in relationship to what you've been sharing today?
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes. What I never realized as I went through, I was incredibly busy. I was, running our business, and I was a mom, and I was serving on 6 or 7 boards, and just busy. Uh, was that, and I was serving. So I was serving. So to me, I was giving, I was giving to the world. And I was, to a certain extent, but I was giving to the world by sacrificing myself. And I would say to anyone who is looking to help the world, is in a practice themselves or a leadership role, is the more that you can know and remember, the more you are able to allow yourself to be whole in every single space that you inhabit. The more you do that, the more radiant you become, the more you are able to serve. Maybe it's not in the way that you thought. Maybe it's not in, chairing 6 boards at one time. But maybe it's instead of bringing something that is uniquely yours into the world that is going to be more helpful than those other things ever could have been. So for me, to anyone sort of looking to assist the world, it was hard for me at first because it felt really selfish. It felt really selfish to say, focus on yourself and learn about yourself. But I think that's imperative to truly allow the unique gifts that every single one of us hold, to allow them to come out and inspire and motivate and heal and energize the world in the unique ways we're supposed to. So if that would be my one message, let the service not come from sacrifice of self. Let it come from abundance of self, because that radiance is unlike any other.
Beautiful. Thank you. So
Mhm.
let's
Yeah,
say someone's listened to that and they go, oh, fantastic. I'd love to do that.
I
But
know.
how do I even start? Right.
Yes.
So I know obviously how I start would be different for everybody. And that's
Yes.
why people have to come and see you. Right.
Mhm.
But, but in the absence of that, just for
Yes.
this conversation,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
are there any kind of ideas that you can give people that might help people to engage with that, or at least start to create some sort of opening to help them do that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, you hear this and when I heard it at first, it really bothered me because I didn't understand what it meant, but sort of following your joy. But I'm going to put it a different way because when you're moving through life so quickly and when you are responding to life, I say from the outside in, because I was contorting myself for an external world instead of the other way around. I think you really need to you need to be able to hear yourself. And that for some people is meditation. For some people, it's not. For me, if you told me to meditate, it is a check mark. I'm doing it well or I'm doing it poorly. That's what meditation was for me in the beginning. But for me, it means sitting when I first wake up for 5 minutes and feeling my body. And for me, it's been my body. My body has been my messenger. Um, and that would be probably what I recommend because so much happens in our heads that it's really hard to get out of it. But the more we can hear the signals that our body sends us and focus on our bodies, the areas of tension when a thought comes up, um, the more we can understand ourselves through walks, through sitting with nature, through and not only those ways. Like for me, I desperately last year wanted to go to where I used to live in South Florida for a few months by myself, not with my husband. So I went to Miami for 2 months because that aliveness was what I knew I needed to learn more about myself. So I would just urge anyone to try to listen to the breadcrumbs when people are like, oh gosh, it'd be great if I could blank. And they sort of dream about it, they feel it, but it seems so far away. How can you get a sliver of that? Because that's what you follow. That's how you follow becoming more of yourself. And to me, it's an infinite journey. I'm never going to be, oh my gosh, I have finally found all of Sara Byers. It's also the understanding that there's no destination. There is only the discovery of this life that happens every single day. It's not something to achieve. And so the more that you can just follow those breadcrumbs every day of where you're being pulled, and allow yourself to hear it, that's what I would suggest. And to your point, they come in really different forms. But I think we all carry a knowing. And so it's trusting that knowing.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think
Yeah.
that is very accessible. And I think any of us could take that and just go, all right, yes, I can just
Oh, thank you. I'm glad.
and I feel like perhaps this is a conversation that is worth listening to more than once. Anyone who's listening to this or watching this, if this is resonating, maybe watch or listen to it again,
Mm,
because there are
love
things
that.
that we've been talking about today, Sarah, that can be heard in multiple different ways and on multiple different levels.
So true.
And
So
I hear
true.
it in what you're sharing. I hear that you've been investigating things on many levels.
I just got goosebumps. That is such an important point. And I'm going to say that because I think that's true of things we read of sort of phrases that can become trite to us. Even the word presence to me. Presence was, you know, meant something to me 10 years ago that was super important. And it means something completely different to me now. And it just shows that, the words, this show, all of the things that you do meet people where they are. And in 6 months' time, they might meet people where they are, but it's a completely different space. And I didn't realize that until a few years ago. And there's so much power in that. So thank you for sharing.
Mm,
That's
Beautiful. Thank you.
yeah.
Well, Sarah, it's been so much fun talking to you. I could talk to you for hours on end. Um,
Thank-
and we've talked about quite a lot today. Has there been a favorite part of our conversation for you today?
Mm. Um, I'm so grateful for the and I don't like the word light, but the energy with which you share what that you share, and you sort of hold us all in your own container. I talk about sort of the container that I'm holding, but for me, my favorite part are these containers that are held by beautiful people like you that allow all of us to reflect about ourselves. That's amazing. And I would say that, for me, I think the greatest message or feeling that I would want to give everyone is just the space of believing in self, understanding that each one of us, that we can listen to me, we can listen to you, and things may resonate, but that within each of us is the miraculous, is literally the miraculous. And the more that we can all recognize that within ourselves, the more miracles we create in the world. So that to me is just the most important message that I would ever want to share for people to feel within themselves.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody watching and listening. And, whether you're listening to it now, shortly after we recorded it, or whether you're listening to it in 2028, thank you. And also thank you for giving yourself the time and the space to invest in your own reflection by tuning into shows like this and other shows you might tune into. And do check out the other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Check out Sarah's work on sarahsbyers.com. And if you like the energy of these conversations and you feel you might want to connect with me and possibly work together, please go to beingspace.world. And thank you again to Sarah.
Thank you, Catherine.